San Diego's tap water runs clean because a lake in the desert is dying. That is the Salton Sea Paradox. California signed the largest agriculture-to-urban water deal in United States history, moved irrigation runoff toward coastal cities, and exposed a toxic lakebed downwind from rural communities. The deal balanced California's water books, but it also helped poison an ecosystem and threaten the respiratory health of 176,000 people who had no seat at the table. This story is about what happens when one region's water security becomes another region's public health crisis. The Salton Sea sits in the Colorado Desert, a 345-square-mile terminal basin, meaning water flows in but has no outlet to the ocean. Most accounts call the sea an accident. That is too simple. In 1905, engineers from the California Development Company cut a breach in the Colorado River's natural levee to increase irrigation flows to the Imperial Valley. Heavy rains overwhelmed the unfinished canal. Discharge rates exceeded 101,000 second feet on a single day. And for 18 months, the Colorado River poured into the Salton Sink, a depression 236 feet below sea level. By 1907, the breach was sealed, and a massive lake filled the basin. But the basin had been receiving Colorado River water long before that engineering failure. Geological and archaeological evidence shows it served as a natural intermittent sink for the river for millennia. Ancestors of the Torres-Martinez Desert Cahuilla Indians lived in the region as early as 10,000 BC, alongside ancient Lake Cahuilla, which formed cyclically when the river diverted its delta northward. So the flooding was predictable. The engineering was negligent. The consequences became permanent. Financial collapse killed the California Development Company, and its assets were absorbed by the newly formed Imperial Irrigation District in 1911. Farmers pushed Washington for an all-American canal that bypassed Mexican territory. Then the 1922 Colorado River Compact divided the river between the upper basin and the lower basin at 7.5 million acre-feet each. The Boulder Canyon Project Act of 1928 authorized Hoover Dam and the canal, giving engineers control over the lower river's flow. A 1931 agreement locked California into 4.4 million acre-feet annually. Inside that allotment, the Imperial Irrigation District secured 3.1 million acre-feet per year, more than 70% of California's Colorado River supply. For comparison, 22 tribal nations across the basin hold combined recognized rights to 3.2 million acre-feet, while Mexico receives 1.5 million by treaty. One irrigation district in the desert outranks both. In 1924, President Calvin Coolidge issued an executive order permanently designating the land beneath the Salton Sea as an agricultural drainage reservoir. In plain terms, the sea became an officially sanctioned industrial sump. For 8 decades, agricultural runoff from the Imperial and Coachella valleys roughly balanced extreme desert evaporation and kept the water volume stable. But the chemistry was always dangerous. Because the basin is endorheic, every salt, mineral, and agrochemical carried by runoff stayed trapped, while pure water evaporated. The lake was not just filling with water, it was concentrating everything agriculture washed off the land. Developers ignored that chemistry in the 1950s and 1960s and sold the Salton Sea as the Salton Riviera. The North Shore Beach and Yacht Club opened in 1959, designed by renowned desert modernist architect Albert Frey, and attracted Frank Sinatra, Bing Crosby, the Beach Boys, and the Marx Brothers. More than 1.5 million visitors came each year, outpacing Yosemite National Park in the same period. Vacation homes and nightclubs lined communities like Bombay Beach. But beneath the glamour, subsurface drainage mobilized naturally occurring selenium from Quaternary marine shales. Sediment analyses later found DDT derivatives, cadmium, copper, nickel, and zinc in the lakebed. The warning signs became impossible to hide. Salinity climbed past 44 parts per thousand, making the sea 50% saltier than the Pacific Ocean. Fertilizer-fed algal blooms consumed dissolved oxygen and triggered catastrophic fish die-offs. Decomposing organic matter generated hydrogen sulfide gas, sending the smell of rotting eggs up to 150 miles west across Southern California. Periodic flooding submerged marinas and hotels. Noxious air, failing infrastructure, and pesticide-contaminated water emptied the resorts within a decade. Ecological collapse accelerated through the 1990s. In 1992, a single epizootic event killed an estimated 150,000 eared grebes. In August 1999, severe oxygen depletion asphyxiated 7.6 million tilapia and croakers in one event. Yet the dying sea remained the most critical remaining node on the Pacific Flyway, supporting over 400 bird species after more than 90% of California's inland wetlands had been destroyed. That was the paradox. The same lake becoming an ecological trap was also one of the last major habitats left. It was deadly, and it was essential. Then came the deal that finished it. For decades, California drew roughly 5.2 million acre-feet of Colorado River water annually, above its legal entitlement of 4.4 million. That worked only because Arizona and Nevada were not using their full allocations. Once they began claiming their shares, the federal government ordered California to cut. The Imperial Irrigation District's huge senior allocation became the obvious target. In October 2003, California adopted the Quantification Settlement Agreement, or QSA, the largest agriculture-to-urban water transfer in United States history. Under the QSA, the IID generated conserved water through large-scale land fallowing and infrastructure upgrades, then transferred that water to the San Diego County Water Authority and the Coachella Valley Water District. Conservation came mainly from lining earthen canals with concrete and forcing advanced irrigation efficiency, which meant less runoff leaving the fields. The QSA locked in California's water supply for up to 75 years. It also locked in the sea's decline, because the Salton Sea survived on that runoff. Mandating efficiency and fallowing cut agricultural runoff into the basin by hundreds of thousands of acre-feet. The agreement required the IID to deliver mitigation water for 15 years, while the state developed a restoration plan. 3 water agencies contributed $133 million to a joint powers authority for mitigation, plus $30 million into a Salton Sea restoration fund. Once that $133 million cap was exhausted, California assumed all remaining financial and environmental liability. That artificial life support ended on December 31, 2017. The decline can be measured acre by acre. Before the QSA's cumulative impacts, roughly 862 acres of playa, or exposed lakebed, sat open in 2003. By the end of 2022, that became 30,569 acres. By November 2023, it reached 33,311. November 2024 brought 37,804 acres. A single-year jump of 4,493 acres. nearly double the annual average of 2,443 acres since 2017. Inflows that once ranged between 1.2 and 1.3 million acre-feet are projected to fall to a steady state of 732,000 acre-feet, leaving exposed playa that could eventually exceed 100 square miles. By 2025, winds are expected to deposit up to 100 tons of fine particulate matter into the regional airshed every day. This is not ordinary desert dust. It is a century-old toxic matrix. Chemical analyses have found arsenic, lead, cadmium, chromium, and selenium, along with DDT derivatives and other legacy pesticides. Extreme eutrophication, meaning nutrient overload, fed algal blooms and bacterial growth for decades. As the shrinking hypersaline lake retreats, decaying biological matter leaves bacterial endotoxins called lipopolysaccharides on the playa. When wind lifts that dust, people inhale abrasive particles, heavy metals, and biological inflammation at the same time. University of Connecticut research showed that Salton Sea dust can rewrite the lung microbiome, promoting pathogenic bacteria like Pseudomonas and Staphylococcus. In controlled exposure chambers, inhaling the dust drove up to 60% of lung immune cells into markers of severe neutrophil inflammation. Mice breathing filtered air showed only 10 to 15%. Researchers described the dust as the chemical fingerprint of dead bacteria. For nearby communities, that is not a metaphor. It is what gets pulled into their lungs. Those communities are overwhelmingly low-income, Latino, and indigenous. Imperial County is over 85% Latinx, 1 in 3 children live in poverty, and unemployment regularly hits 20%. Many residents are Purépecha indigenous immigrants from Michoacán, Mexico, without the financial mobility to leave. The AIR cohort study tracked 491 children near the sea, with a mean age of 10.2 years. At baseline enrollment, 24% already had an asthma diagnosis, nearly 3 times the national average for boys, and over 4 times the average for girls. Children within 11 kilometers of the sea showed stunted lung development, with a 52.18 milliliter per year lower growth in forced vital capacity, and a 38.7 milliliter per year lower growth in forced expiratory volume, compared with children farther away. The pattern gets worse during dust events. For every additional 100 hours of high dust exposure, wheezing prevalence rose 3.9 percentage points. Bronchitic symptoms rose 3.1 points, and sleep disruption from respiratory distress increased 2.7 points. Imperial County consistently records California's highest asthma-related emergency room visit rate for school-age children. Pediatric ED visit rates reach 149.6 per 10,000 residents, compared with a state average of 80.7. These are signs of children breathing with less reserve as they grow. This is the cost hidden behind distant water transfers. Clean taps in one place, damaged lungs in another. The economics are brutal. Every 1-foot drop in the Salton Sea's surface elevation generates an estimated $151.5 million in localized respiratory mortality costs. The Pacific Institute projects the present value of healthcare costs and premature mortality from inaction at between $3 billion and $37 billion through 2047. A single asthma emergency department visit in the neighboring San Joaquin Valley costs society between $3,353 and $5,003, while pediatric hospital admissions run up to $3,023 per day. Medi-Cal covers 57.83% of asthma hospitalizations in Imperial County, and Medicare covers another 19.88%. In other words, taxpayers are already paying for a water deal negotiated to benefit coastal cities. The costs are not staying local. They move through public insurance, school finance, and state budgets. The burden spreads into schools, hospitals, and local government. Asthma drives chronic student absenteeism, and every missed school day reduces state funding under California's average daily attendance formula. Economic modeling puts the cost of each chronically absent student at $5,630. Statewide, asthma-related absenteeism costs California $345 million per year. Coachella Valley Unified School District reported a 33.6% chronic absenteeism rate in 2025, while Imperial Unified reported 23.4%. Districts are diverting scarce education money into HEPA air filtration, school health aides, and weatherization to keep indoor air breathable during dust events. Safety net hospitals are under the same pressure. Pioneers Memorial Healthcare District in Brawley wrote off $9.92 million in bad debt in fiscal year 2023 and reserved another $4.97 million against future uncollectible revenues. 69% of patient accounts receivable are tied to Medi-Cal and Medicare, leaving little higher-margin private insurance. Survival depends on disproportionate share hospital funding and supplemental intergovernmental transfers that are politically fragile and mathematically capped. Meanwhile, Imperial Valley farmland values have fallen from $14,500 per acre to roughly $12,000, the worst correction in 3 decades. Salton City home prices dropped 24% between 2010 and 2016. The Pacific Institute estimates up to $7 billion in possible property value losses, at least $6 million per year in lost tourism spending, and a projected $712 million aggregate loss in tax revenues if the crisis remains unmitigated. For years, the state missed legally mandated acreage restoration targets. 5 consecutive years of misses followed the 2017 order, and administrative failure became the defining feature of the Salton Sea Management Program. Then, 2025 and 2026 brought capital injections that finally produced visible work. The Species Conservation Habitat Project expanded from 4,100 acres to over 9,500 acres, funded by $245 million from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation and $160 million from California's Proposition 4 climate bond. Filling of the first megaponds began in March 2025. Thousands of birds, including American white pelicans, brown pelicans, and black-necked stilts, were observed foraging and nesting. Fish populations colonized the wetlands almost immediately. But the fundamental paradox remains. The IID committed to conserving 800,000 acre-feet of water between 2024 and 2026 to stabilize the Colorado River system and keep water in Lake Mead to protect Hoover Dam's hydroelectric capacity. That single conservation agreement caused the sea to shrink by 3,500 acres and drop 10 inches in surface elevation in a matter of months. Every acre-foot left in Lake Mead to power the American Southwest translates into more toxic dust in the Imperial Valley. The policy bind is stark. Saving the river accelerates local exposure. Restoration can build habitat. It cannot erase the trade-off. Lithium Valley is the one potential revenue stream that could change the financing. The plan is to extract lithium from geothermal brine beneath the sea's southern shore for electric vehicle batteries. California enacted Senate Bill 125, requiring 20% of lithium tax revenues to go into a Salton Sea lithium fund. Environmental groups have filed CEQA appeals against the Hell's Kitchen lithium mine, arguing that the project underestimates air quality and water impacts. If litigation stops commercialization, the projected fund revenues disappear. $9 million in 2026 to 2027, rising to $35 million by 2028 to 2029. The larger Colorado River fight is getting sharper. 7 basin states are locked in hostile negotiations over post-2026 operational guidelines, with the 2007 interim guidelines expiring at the end of 2026. States are building multi-million-dollar legal war chests for Supreme Court litigation. Urban constituencies want senior agricultural water rights restructured, pointing out that municipal users pay an average of $512 per acre-foot, while massive irrigation districts pay $30, and sometimes nothing. 20 extended families in the Imperial Valley collectively receive 386.5 billion gallons annually, roughly 1/7 of the Colorado River's lower flow. One family network consumed an estimated 22.5 billion gallons in 2022, nearly equal to Scottsdale, Arizona's entire municipal allotment. That is why the Salton Sea is not just an environmental disaster. It is a water accounting story, with lungs attached. A distant diplomatic agreement balanced California's books and helped hydrate coastal cities, while the inland desert absorbed a crisis projected to cost between $3 billion and $37 billion. Heavy metals and agrochemicals did not vanish when the water evaporated. They changed form, from a hydrological threat in the water column to an aerosolized threat in the air. Keeping Lake Mead away from Deadpool costs Imperial County children an asthma emergency room visit rate nearly double the California average. Concrete lining canals for coastal water security costs farm workers lung capacity while they harvest winter vegetables in 120-degree heat. Urban water security in the American Southwest is being subsidized by the respiratory health of rural, predominantly Latino children in the Imperial Valley. That is the unpriced transfer at the center of the crisis. The ledger balances. The lungs do not.